And I got married March 19th, was it?
March 19th,
March 19th,
1950.
1950. My brother-in-law called me and says, why don't you come to Detroit? I was making $50 a week working for my father. He said, you can make $100 a week driving a truck in Detroit. So we drove in 11 days after we were married. And I had $100 in my pocket. And that was the start. I started knocking doors. We rented an apartment for $35 a month. She got pregnant in the 6 months we were married. The 6 months we were married, and they kicked us out of the apartment. We had to go buy a house. Had to borrow $1,000 from my father, and lie I was making $85 a month payments, but I made it. I made it. We had 3 children, and that's it.
Evergreen and 7 Mile Road was our first house. It was a Slatkin house, and it was a row house, like
It was
say
only
little
about
boxes,
1,100 square feet.
and they're all made out of ticky-tacky. Well, these were all these row houses. We had a very nice street, a very nice neighborhood, and the shul, which was first called Evergreen Jewish Community, they named it, and we met in a house, a basement, the first Yontif, because Maury called up the rabbi of Young Israel and asked him, could we ride there because we're too far away, and he said, absolutely not. It was it's worse to ride to shul than anything else. Stay home. So we found the neighbors, and the neighbors said, we're having services in the basement of so-and-so's house. And that was our first Rosh Hashanah. We weren't too active then because I was having the baby at that time. But my children, my 3 children, all were raised walking distance to that shul, and they had very nice youth groups there too.
We were on Vaughn until Robert was 13 years old. He was a freshman in high school, and 4 Schwarzes beat him up. And I went to the school the next day, and I said, I want my son passed without prejudice. I don't want him in this school anymore. And we bought a house in Oak Park, and he went and he ran a radio station at Oak Park High School.
I asked around in West Bloomfield, and I asked in Southfield, and they said there's drugs there. That was enough to keep me out, but I didn't know that Oak Park also had drugs. But they did have a good experience. My middle daughter said that she didn't know that in Detroit, the high school was so dangerous actually to walk home, that the Jewish boys used to walk her home from school. And she was so happy in her senior. Usually you move in the senior year very unhappy, but she said she never had such a good time as in Oak Park as a senior there, because she was new, and she knew that she had a course called British Lit. She learned more in that British Lit class than she'd ever had in Detroit schools. So it wasn't too bad of a move for the children in Oak Park. It was a nice community at that time, nice Jewish community. And the reason we moved to a condo, most of the Jewish came around, when was it, around 1960s, that there was an exodus from the suburbs out farther and farther. And his friends, his golfer's friends, said, why are you staying? Why are you staying? So I found a condo off of Orchard Lake Road, a big one, good enough to have the family over and dinners. And we stayed there at Pepperell for 24 years until we moved here. The daughter is Julie, and raising her was mostly on Evergreen with Rabbi Schnipper's congregation. And she was quite popular, but she didn't realize she was quite popular. She had a lot of Jewish friends. And when it came time for her to go to college, she decided she wanted to go to Israel. Well, Israel was expensive, and she belonged to the youth groups. I put her into a Ulpan youth group at the JCC. and she wasn't anxious to go, but she started in there and she loved it. And she loved learning Hebrew, and she made a lot of friends. That's where she met her husband, in that great group at the JCC, Opan, to speak Hebrew. So she took a year of Opan, and they sent them to Israel, the whole group. That was her first trip. Later on, she came back, and she went to Oakland Community College because it was cheaper, and we could pay for what we saved on say, Wayne University. We could send her to Israel for a year at Tel Aviv University. And she completed a year at Tel Aviv University, and she came back and got her undergraduate degree at Wayne University, and then she got a master's degree in library science, which is her vocation to this day.
That's what she's doing now.
And her husband had his eye on her all the time. And he even came to visit me, which is unusual, by himself while she was in Israel. And they were married, I think it was, how many years? I think 30 years already now. They have three children, and they live here in Detroit. My second child was a girl. Her name is Sharon Reinhurst, and she was 5 years younger than Julie. She had the worst of the Detroit schools. As I told you before, when we moved to Oak Park, she was delighted. And she went to Oakland University, got a teaching degree there. And then she met her husband, and they married quite a few years later. He was from Wisconsin, a podiatrist, and he wanted her to have an occupation besides just right out of college. So she taught at Ann Arbor, first beginning of Ann Arbor Day School, the very beginning. She didn't like it at all, but she stuck it out, and they were married a year later here in Detroit at Adat Shalom. And they moved to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where he had started his practice there in podiatry. So then she had one child, was a boy. His name is Adam. And then I think 2 years later she had another boy named Benjamin. The Adam was named for my father, and Benjamin was for his father. The youngest one is Robert. I think I mentioned about Robert already. I think a mother's heart is for the youngest one all the time. But he's been very good to us all these years, too. And a blessing.
I took him to a golf course at 14 years old and taught him how to play golf. He plays great golf now. And he's a bowler. He does everything. He runs the business. He does bowling. He's very
married.
active. He's financially secure, and
has 2 children.
He is a sophisticated businessman, and he has a very tough role to run because he's got 20 employees, and the city is on their tail all the time. And I go to the yard 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday I go in just for to take care of the banking. Wednesday I go in and sign paychecks. Friday we go and buy food for the Shabbos. Okay, that's what we did today.
And I didn't even mention his wife, did I? His wife was from Cleveland, Ohio. They met at a Hillel function. That's why I support Hillel so much, because I believe it's doing a great job with the young ones. Rabbi Addison was his name, and they were at a function, and Rabbi Addison introduced him to Lori. And it took a while. Lori came here to Detroit, worked here for a while, and then I think it took about 3 years, they were married here in Detroit, and they were married in Cleveland, Ohio, at Warren Center, I believe it was. And they lived happily ever after, I hope.
You have 12 grandchildren.
No? What do you mean 12 grandchildren?
Want to say 12?
No. We have,
I think,
what are you counting, the great-grandchildren? We have 3 new great-grandchildren.
4 great-grandchildren. And I think
But-
we have,
And 3 out of 3
we
marriages.
have more than that. Anyway, whatever it is.
We have nice grandchildren, a
We
nice
have
family.
a good family.